Imagine waking up one morning and finding that your government has shut off the internet. No email, no contact with the outside world. For millions in Iran, this isn't a hypothetical. It's reality. Now imagine a satellite internet company stepping in and reportedly waiving subscription fees to help people get back online. Sounds heroic, right? But what does this decision really mean for the people on the ground, for the satellite internet industry, and for the future of global politics? Let's break it down. First, let's get our facts straight. According to multiple reports from tech journalists and regional sources, Starlink temporarily waived subscription fees for Iranian users during a government-initiated internet shutdown. The company itself didn't issue a press release or official confirmation about broad fee waivers, but evidence from users on the ground and leaked communications suggest the company enabled partial free access in certain areas. The timing is critical here. These shutdowns typically happen during periods of political unrest, when governments want to control the flow of information and prevent organizing. In those moments, internet access becomes more than convenience. It becomes a lifeline. But here's where it gets complicated. A fee waiver sounds generous, but it raises questions. Why did Starlink do this? Was it purely humanitarian? Was it a strategic business move to gain market share in a restricted region? Or was it something more, a statement about information freedom in authoritarian contexts? Some observers suggest it was an effort to maintain Starlink's reputation as a humanitarian force in global crises. Others see it as a calculated move to position the company as an alternative to state-controlled internet infrastructure. And then there's a third possibility, that this decision reflects Starlink's evolving role from a technology company to a geopolitical actor. To understand what happened in Iran, we need to look at Starlink's track record. This isn't the first time the company has found itself at the center of a global crisis. Let's start with Ukraine. When Russia invaded in February 2022, traditional telecommunications infrastructure became a primary target. Cell towers were destroyed. Fiber optic cables were severed. Entire regions went dark. Within days, Elon Musk announced that Starlink would be activated over Ukraine. Thousands of terminals were shipped to the country. The impact was immediate and significant. Ukrainian forces used Starlink to coordinate operations. Hospitals used it to maintain contact with medical networks. Citizens used it to stay connected with loved ones and the outside world. Starlink became critical infrastructure in a war zone. But it also became controversial. There were reports of service interruptions during key military operations. Questions arose about who was paying for the service. Debates erupted about whether a private company should have this much control over wartime communications. Then there are the natural disasters. When Hurricane Ian devastated Florida in 2022, Starlink offered free service to affected areas. After the Maui wildfires in 2023, they did the same. During catastrophic flooding in Pakistan, Starlink terminals helped restore connectivity. In these scenarios, the value proposition is clear. Traditional infrastructure is physically destroyed. Satellite internet can bypass that damage. There's no geopolitical controversy, just a company helping people communicate during emergencies. But even here, questions emerge. Who decides which disasters get free service and which don't? How long does the free period last? What happens when the cameras leave and the crisis fades from headlines? Now we come to Iran. And this is where Starlink's crisis playbook meets a fundamentally different challenge. In Ukraine, the infrastructure was destroyed by war. In natural disasters, it's destroyed by nature. But in Iran, the infrastructure works perfectly fine. The government just chooses to turn it off. Here's what most people don't understand about internet shutdowns. When a government blocks internet access, they're not destroying physical infrastructure. They're controlling the digital pathways, the routing protocols, the DNS servers, the gateway connections that allow data to flow in and out of the country. Satellite internet like Starlink can bypass some of these controls because the signal comes from space, not from government-controlled fiber optic cables. But, and this is critical, it's not a perfect solution. First, you need physical equipment. A Starlink terminal costs hundreds of dollars. You need to smuggle it into the country or have purchased it before restrictions began. Second, the government can detect satellite signals. They can jam them. They can triangulate where they're being used. And third, they can make using unauthorized internet access illegal, with severe penalties. This brings us to the human element. Even if Starlink waives fees, users face real risks. In authoritarian contexts, accessing banned communications tools can be classified as a crime against state security. We're talking about potential imprisonment, fines, surveillance, or worse. For some people, especially activists, journalists, or opposition figures, the risk might be worth it. For ordinary citizens trying to stay in touch with family or run a business, the calculation is very different. So when we talk about Starlink helping people in Iran, we need to acknowledge this complexity. Free access doesn't mean safe access, and connectivity doesn't guarantee freedom from consequences. There's also a practical question. How many people can actually benefit from this? To use Starlink in Iran, you need to have already acquired the hardware, know how to set it up, be willing to take the legal risk, and hope the government isn't actively jamming satellite signals in your area. Reports suggest that only a small fraction of Iranians have access to Starlink terminals. We're talking thousands of users in a country of 88 million people. The symbolic significance may outweigh the practical impact. Now we arrive at the bigger picture. What does it mean when a private company based in one country starts providing internet access to citizens of another country whose government is actively trying to restrict that access? Starlink was designed to solve a technical problem, providing fast internet to remote areas. But somewhere along the way, it became something more. It became a tool of geopolitical influence. Think about it this way. Traditional internet infrastructure requires massive investment, years of construction, and cooperation with local governments. A single Starlink terminal can be activated in minutes and works anywhere on Earth with a clear view of the sky. This fundamentally changes the power dynamics. Governments can no longer fully control information flow by controlling physical infrastructure. That's a tectonic shift in how power operates in the 21st century. But here's where it gets really interesting. If Starlink can decide to provide free internet access in Iran during a government shutdown, what's to stop them from making the opposite decision somewhere else? Could they shut off service to protest movements they disagree with? Could they prioritize access based on which governments they have better relationships with? Could they become a tool of foreign policy for whatever country has the most influence over the company? These aren't theoretical concerns. We've already seen hints of this tension in Ukraine, where service interruptions during military operations led to questions about who was making decisions and why. And here's the thing, there's virtually no international framework for regulating this. Satellite internet operates in a gray zone between national sovereignty and the global commons of space. Traditional telecommunications companies are heavily regulated because they operate within national borders. But satellites orbit above all borders. Who has jurisdiction? Who sets the rules? These are questions we're only beginning to grapple with. Let's zoom out even further. What we're really witnessing here is a fundamental truth about the modern world. Information access is power. Throughout history, controlling information has been central to controlling populations. Emperors controlled the written word. Governments controlled the press. Dictators controlled the radio waves and television broadcasts. The internet was supposed to change that. It was supposed to be decentralized, democratizing, impossible to fully control. And for a while, it seemed like that might be true. But governments learned. They built sophisticated censorship systems. They developed the ability to shut down entire networks. They turned the internet from a tool of liberation into a tool of surveillance and control. Satellite internet like Starlink represents a new phase in this ongoing battle. It's harder to control because the infrastructure isn't on the ground. But it's not uncontrollable. And whoever controls it wields enormous influence. Which brings us to an uncomfortable question. Is it better for internet access to be controlled by governments or by corporations? Governments, at least in democracies, have some accountability to citizens. But they can also abuse power, especially authoritarian governments. Corporations have profit motives and innovation incentives. but they're accountable primarily to shareholders, not to the public good. Starlink's actions in Iran highlight this tension. The company made a decision that many see as admirable. But it's a decision made by corporate executives, not through any democratic process or international agreement. So where does this leave us? What does Starlink's Iran decision tell us about the future of connectivity, power, and freedom? First, expect satellite internet to play an increasingly important role in global affairs. Starlink is just the beginning. Amazon's Project Kuiper is launching. China is building its own megaconstellations. The European Union is developing sovereign satellite internet capabilities. Within a decade, there could be tens of thousands of satellites providing internet access from space. The competition won't just be commercial, it will be geopolitical. Second, we're going to see increasing tension between information access and national sovereignty. Countries that want to control their information spaces will push back against satellite internet providers. They'll develop jamming technology. They'll impose harsh penalties on users. They'll demand that companies block access within their borders. And companies like Starlink will have to make difficult choices. Do they comply with government demands and potentially betray their users? Or do they resist and risk being banned from major markets? Third, we desperately need new international frameworks for governing satellite-based communications. Right now, we're operating in a regulatory vacuum. That's not sustainable. We need agreements about when it's appropriate to provide internet access despite government objections. We need rules about data sovereignty and privacy. We need accountability mechanisms that balance corporate innovation with public interest. These are hard problems. They involve competing values: freedom versus sovereignty, innovation versus regulation, corporate power versus government authority. But we can't avoid them. Let's come back to where we started. Starlink reportedly waived fees for users in Iran during an internet shutdown. On its face, this seems like a straightforward good deed. People needed internet. A company provided it for free. But as we've seen, the reality is far more complex. This decision sits at the intersection of technology, business, politics, and human rights. It raises questions about power, control, and the future of global communications. The truth is this: internet access in the 21st century is not just about convenience or entertainment. It's about survival, freedom, and power. It's about who gets to communicate, who gets to organize, who gets to tell their story. It's about who can be heard and who can be silenced. And as companies like Starlink continue to grow and expand their capabilities, they become more than just service providers. They become infrastructure providers. They become gatekeepers. They become players in the global balance of power. Whether that's a good thing or a dangerous thing probably depends on who you ask. An activist in Iran trying to organize protests might see Starlink as a liberator. A government official worried about national security might see it as a threat. A tech entrepreneur might see it as the future of communications. A civil liberties advocate might see it as the privatization of a public good. The answer isn't simple, but the question is critical. Because the decisions being made right now by companies like Starlink, by governments around the world, by international bodies, will shape the information landscape for generations to come. Starlink's fee waiver in Iran is just one data point in a much larger story. But it's an important one. It shows us that the battle for information freedom is far from over. In fact, it's just entering a new phase. One fought not just on the ground, but from space. So what do you think? Should satellite internet companies intervene in government shutdowns? Is this humanitarian aid or geopolitical interference? Are we heading toward a freer information future or a more complicated one? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this analysis valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the technology shaping our world. Click the bell to get notified when we publish new videos. For more on satellite internet and global connectivity, check out our recent videos on Starlink's performance in 2026 and the best internet options for remote work. Links are in the description. Stay informed, stay connected, and stay critical. See you in the next one.